Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving in advance. Hope you have a wonderful day with your family and friends tomorrow. Welcome to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm here in the Fan Cave. Chris Muller's up at 93.7 The Fan. We, as always, have a lot to talk about, and we'll get into the Steelers and what happened today at practice, which wasn't a whole bunch. But I want to begin with the Penguins and show you some highlights from this game tonight, and then we'll talk about it, Chris, because the Penguins got 2 big points after they had struggled over the weekend. Chris, the story here is Tristan Jarry. He hadn't played. He comes back. He came into this with a .911 save percentage, which is pretty good. He added to that here. And now I'm just wondering what happens with him. There are a lot of talk. You hear speculation from other teams that have issues in goal, like Edmonton. You know, that's one of the things that has denied them an opportunity to win Stanley Cups the last 2 years. How do you think the Penguins play this, knowing that they now appear to have some goaltending depth?
Well, just briefly, Bob, the story was young Stella Filipponi, all of 2 years old, turning the power on at the arena tonight. She was part of that pregame ceremony. I heard she got a lot of cheers, and her father, who may or may not have been holding her at the time, got some booze.
I will confirm that.
Crowd,
Amanda was adorable, yes. Or I mean, I'm sorry, Stella was adorable. I didn't see Amanda there, but Stella was adorable.
No, she was great. So that was the A1 story. But as far as Jarry goes, I think it's pretty obvious that they've got to play him to shop him now. I think Miroshov so far has shown them exactly what they want to see. I think Jarry, anything you get from him that allows a team that is desperate for goaltending like the Oilers to pay you any kind of reasonable price to take him off your hands that's gravy right there. They don't want that salary on the books. Their future goaltender is here, and he's 21 years old, and he's not under some sort of onerous contract. I suspect that they're going to have to try to thread the needle in the next couple of weeks to get him enough starts to try to showcase him, and tonight would have been one of the games you'd want all those potential suitors, Bob, to see, because he was really good. And then I think Kyle Dubas wants to ship him out for the best offer at really the first possible opportunity, and I think that's just good business here. And if all the while he plays reasonably well and enhances his stock while you're putting him out there to try to trade him, all the better for the actual team. But it seems to me that if they have their druthers, his days have to be numbered.
Yeah, but if they play him and he does well consistently, the price of poker may go up a little bit, which is to their advantage. So I suspect they're going to be playing him quite a bit over the next several days leading into the holidays, and we'll see how it goes. And that's a nice position to be in when you have guys like Miroshov. I still think Shilov's at 24 is a good goaltender, and I think Blomqvist is also in the mix here. So they do have all of a sudden some depth, at least you would think some depth going on there. But, you know, this is one game. They got games against Columbus coming up and then back on Monday night. So they have a lot of games coming up in the next couple of days. All right, let's talk about the Steelers today, because Aaron Rodgers did not practice. DK Metcalf did not practice. Now, I think the Rodgers decision will come just like last week, probably on Saturday. But he seemed like he wasn't very comfortable with his left wrist yet, said he doesn't feel comfortable going under center. And Metcalf, you know, he has an ankle issue or hip or one of those two things. And I'm wondering about him, too. He didn't practice today. They need him specifically to really not only play, but play better than he has. He had only 5 catches, 22 yards, and that's not enough targets. It's not enough yards for him.
Well, they're not creative about getting him open. They don't have anybody else as a wide receiver, too, that opposing teams have to respect. So those teams can pay all the attention in the world to DK Metcalf without any real fear that the Steelers are going to hurt them for it. So it's not completely his fault. If he's not 100%, that's going to make the entire task even more difficult. But I think for most people, Bob, the A1 story is Rodgers. I was fooled last week. I thought he was pretty ebullient. I thought he was pretty positive midweek when he talked, and he seemed, you know, he was joking around about Mason Rudolph and how much he believed in him, and it just struck all the tone and the right notes of a player who thought he was going to play, who thought this was going to be good enough to go. And the fact that it wasn't, and then the way he sounded this week, and he responded to a question about whether it was a doctor's clearance thing for him. He said, no, it isn't about the doctors clearing me to play. It's about whether I think I can play. Just the way he sounded, the combination of that, the fact that he's still not comfortable going under center, it just makes me think, Bob, that it's better than 50-50 that we see Mason Rudolph play quarterback for them again this weekend.
That's the way I see it, too.
I just don't get the sense that Aaron Rodgers, as competitive as he is comfortable right now and maybe younger in his career would be more willing to take the risk. But I think those injuries tend to hurt a lot more, and the idea of re-aggravating them is a lot less of something that you want to deal with when you're his age, and he's almost 42 years old now. So I think it's going to be Mason Rudolph on Sunday.
We got a big triple header tomorrow. We'll talk about each of those games. That would be Green Bay, Detroit, a good one to start it off. Then Kansas City and Dallas, which will be fun to watch. And then at the end, the most meaningful one for Steeler fans, so that would be Cincinnati at Baltimore. We'll get into that, and we have a big baseball signing to talk about when we come back. Want your calls at 412-575-2600. This is a Thanksgiving Eve edition of the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. All right, welcome back. This is our Xfinity tweet of the night. It comes from Jeff Passan, who says, right-hander Dylan Cease in Toronto. 7 years, $210 million pending a physical here. Sources tell ESPN the defending American League champions get one of the best arms in the free agent market, and that they do, and that roughly comes out to $30 million a year. But what's interesting, and Steve Benko, our producer here, put together a very interesting comparison with Mitch Keller and Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease has a really good arm. He's one of the best strikeout pitchers in the game. But when you look at these numbers, you say to yourself, all right, Mitch Keller's making $17 million a year, Chris. This guy's going to make $30 million. And by and large, Mitch Keller has better numbers, a better WAR, a better ERA, more innings pitched, all of this stuff. He didn't have the strikeouts, of course. That's what Cease does, but a better whip. All of these numbers are in favor of Keller, which to me suggests that the Pirates, if they do trade him, should look at that and use this and say, hey, you want this guy? It's going to cost you a little bit more than maybe you think.
Well, Steve Benko can spam me with all the Phoenix Suns highlights he'd like, or St. John's Red Storm highlights for disagreeing with him here. But I don't think it's fair to Dylan Cease to compare him to Mitch Keller. Last year, he was the slightly inferior pitcher by WAR, but he's been a remarkably consistent pitcher in another stat, which is called FIP, Fielding Independent Pitching. He's been in the low threes, I think, for the last 5 years in a row. Essentially, if you see a guy like that with an ERA that's a run and a half higher, he was a victim of some bad luck. But twice in his career, he's led his league, once the AL and then once this year in the NL, in strikeouts per 9 innings. Teams absolutely still value guys who miss bats at a high rate more than they value almost anything else. And I just think he's been a pretty obviously better pitcher than Mitch Keller in the balance of his career. That's why he's getting this contract.
But my point is, he's $13 million cheaper.
Yeah, they could. Sure, they could ask for more, but I guess my point in bringing up all those peripheral numbers, Bob, is to say that I think teams now are mostly run by Ivy League guys and not by the types who used to maybe play or were scout-based in their expertise. And I don't think the Ivy League numbers guys are going to be as fooled by that. They're going to say, well, yeah, you want more for Mitch Keller because he's so much cheaper than Dylan Cease, but while the numbers might look similar, they're not really comparable pitchers. And I think that's what the Pirates are going to run into. Of course, I would hope that Ben Cherington at least attempts to do what you're describing, because if he doesn't, then it's malpractice by him. It's dereliction of duty.
You're absolutely right about that. We'll see. So far, they haven't spent any money. They better start doing that. We have a tweet in from Bob S47 who says, just hypothetically, if Tristan Jarry continues to play and if it's sustainable, what do you think really happens? Is there any chance they would keep him? My thought there would be no, only because they have guys who need to play, and you don't want to block them. And if you could use that to get something, plus his salary, quite frankly, is not enormous. It's not one of those contracts that most teams would shy away from. At least I don't think. There are guys making 10, 9, 8, 7 million. He's making 5.2, I think, this year. So, Chris, I think if that continues to play, then my goal would still be to move him. But the question is when and to whom and who has more assets. That's the way I would look at it.
Sure, I think you try to sell him to the highest bidder. I think you made a good point earlier when you said if he keeps playing somewhat often and plays well, the price to the table stakes go up for anybody that wants to get him. But Shilov's another good young goalie, only 24, like you mentioned. If you can still get he and Miroshov worked in there and you're not seeing a big downturn, then I just don't think there's any scenario by which you keep Tristan Jarry. I know Kyle Dubas has had sort of a frustrating past with goaltenders. That's why it never really worked out in Toronto, and I think a lot of people have trouble figuring out that position. But I don't think there's going to be any kind of, ooh, Tristan Jarry's playing well, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush here kind of situation. I think they're going to deal him the second they feel like his value is at its apex. And by the way, if we're just being honest about this, there's always the chance that Tristan Jarry's play starts to crater Now, I think he's probably a function of having a much better systematic hockey team in front of him that's not allowing as many ridiculously high-class chances. But we've seen this guy melt down before. So I think if you're Kyle Dubas, you have to be very careful about holding on to him too long because you think his play could go even higher.
Yeah, I also think, though, he has benefited from a stable life in terms of wife, and now he has a child. And talking to him recently, I get the feeling he is a totally different kind of guy. But we have people on the line who want to talk about some hockey, and I know one Joe just dropped off, and I was going to go to him. So, Joe, if you dropped off, you should call back on. Meantime, let's go to another Joe. Joe in Whitehall joins us right now. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Bob, Chris. First off, happy early Thanksgiving to both ends.
Thank you.
So Brandon Cooks ends up at Buffalo, is that correct?
Desperation move in my view.
Yeah, well, who's the number 2 wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now?
That's why I thought they brought Marquise Valdez-Scantling in.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that's what it was, but so far we haven't seen it. Not that he's a number 2. I think it's clearly at this point Austin, although I see a push from Roman Wilson, who's gotten more good routes recently. That's all I got to go on with him.
Does Brandon Cook not have a better track record?
Yeah.
He does, but Joe, I would say this. Hold on. I would say, while you can obviously try to accumulate as many of those guys as you can and just see if one of them sticks, the Brandon Cooks who was on the Saints this year, and I know the Saints stink, I get it, but that Brandon Cooks is not the dude who maybe 3-4 years ago was still a 1,000-yard quality player. I mean, I understand you see the name, you see the production, he's done it in multiple places, so it's probably more him than any kind of system that he's benefited from, but he's at an age where I think a lot of those guys fall off. I mean, look at the cautionary tales that this team has undergone or suffered through trying to find an aging receiver that's still a bargain. Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson. Sure, although Mike Williams at least won them a game with a catch, but like Brandon Cooks is better than all those guys in my opinion, but Brandon Cooks now might not be, and that's kind of the point.
And it also goes to show you just how much they're struggling in Buffalo. Keon Coleman, who was a big pick for them, he's been scratched, benched, whatever you want to call it. Shakir has been okay, and he can be okay, but they don't have a lot of depth there either. They rely on Cook. They rely on Josh Allen to run as well. Let's go back to the lines. We have Kirk and Manor. Hey, Kirk, how are you?
Hey, how are you guys doing? I just want to ask you guys' opinion. What do you think about Mike Tomlin's coaching of this team this year?
Well, I think they have, Kirk, I think they have a lot of schematic issues that have really hurt them in both sides of the ball. And it strictly comes down to coaching. That's the only way you can look at it. They do not sequence guys open. They don't take advantage of things offensively by ignoring things in the middle of the field largely. They also, on the other side of it, Chris, man, what we saw last week was a catastrophe in the second half of that game, especially when Chicago decided to just pass the ball in the middle and nobody was there. And I don't know if it's confusion, I don't know if it's missed assignments, but it's just not a very good trend. And they did that in the Green Bay game as well.
So, I mean, offensively, I think the team broadly still takes on his identity too much, which is this ultra risk-averse mindset, which means that they don't throw the ball to the intermediate middle of the field, which is where a lot of teams live, guys like Jared Goff, et cetera, good quarterbacks, in other words, because I think Mike is terrified of turning the ball over. And then, so that's him globally influencing them in a bad way. And then I think defensively, most everyone agrees he is the guy calling the shots. Maybe it's Terrell Austin, literally, but Mike calls or Mike gets called what he wants called, Bob. And I just thought he gets asked by Chris Carter of the Post-Gazette every week, very schematic, dense questions, and he usually sloughs them off. But, man, I thought the one this week hit close to home. Carter accurately said what the Bears did. Trips right, 4 verts, vertical concepts against a cover 3, like, what happened there? And Mike said, I'm not divulging it. Well, you can put the tape on, Bob, and anybody that's done any kind of film watching in their life or listened to one podcast that talks about route concepts can tell you 4 verticals against a cover 3 means a touchdown for the team running 4 verticals. The last person on earth to seemingly realize that on that play was Mike Tomlin. So to answer Kirk's question in a word, how do I feel about Mike Tomlin's coaching? 2 words, not good.
On that note, we're going to go to a break. Andrew in Mount Lebanon, we'll try to squeak you on next. Don't go away. You're watching the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. All right, we're back. Time for one more call here before we go. That's Andrew in Mount Lebanon. Thanks for hanging on, Andrew. Make it quick, please.
Hey, Bob, Chris. Thanks. I don't think there's any difference really this week between Mason or Aaron starting. I don't see what the forward direction is for the Steelers in terms of if DK's out, if the defense is hurt. I mean, we're going to see the same type of game as we always see, and I don't understand with the coaching decisions what this is going to change one way or another.
Yeah, that's a good question about how effective can Rodgers be if he's in there. I know this, Buffalo gives up a lot of rushing yards. If I were them, I would try to pound that as much as I can, Chris.
I mean, they're pound for pound probably the worst rush defense in the league. I believe it goes 30th in yards allowed, 32nd in touchdowns on the ground, and 31st in yards per carry allowed against. The Steelers should just line up and run the ball with the jumbo package until Buffalo stops them. If they don't stop them, keep running it.
Yep.
But I have a feeling that it's not going to be that simple, and I worry that the Steelers' inability to make some plays in the passing game will bite them.
All right, Chris, we're out of time. Thanks for joining me, and all the best to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes, sir, and thank you guys out there for joining us. We'll do it again tomorrow night, and every night. We're here every night talking sports. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you again tomorrow right here at 10:35. Have a great holiday.